Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 20 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
And this time we are still reading Myths of India. This time we're covering the Legends of Krishna. This is a much shorter chapter than the last one, so it should be a shorter
Which book
episode.
are we reading?
We are reading Jake Jackson's Myths and Legends, a book all about world mythology. So brief summaries and snippets of mythologies from around the world.
Yes, and we're going to have probably a short one today, I expect, because it's a short chapter.
True. We are back in person again today.
Yes, live and in person, because some romantic had to come home for Valentine's weekend.
Yes, so now he can more efficiently interrupt me as I'm talking.
You know, there have been several occasions where I tried to interrupt you and you just rolled right over me.
Well, I can't hear you when we're on Zoom. It
Right.
cuts you out,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
That's the best part of the podcast for me, is interrupting you.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
Our listener agrees.
Yes. So the first story we hear about is, as you might expect, Krishna's...
Do you want to give your do you want to give your general views of it at the beginning or end?
We could do that at the end.
Yeah, you always like to wait till the end.
Well, yeah, we don't want to spoil the stories.
Well, it's like a introduction or something, you know.
I guess that's true, but we could talk about that at the end.
All right.
If that's okay with you.
All right, that's fine.
All right. So we start with Krishna's birth. And we start with King Ugrasena, the king of Mathura, who had a beautiful wife who was sadly barren until coming across a demon in her husband's form, and so she had a son named Kansa, who was cruel and mocked his father's devotion to Rama.
These stories remind you of the spider stories from the African tales?
How so?
Like the trickster type stuff?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It seemed a little random to
Lots
me.
of trickster stuff, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, go ahead.
So
that was my thought about these Krishna stories.
Yes, thank you. You tell me go ahead, and then you immediately jump in with another thought. That's fantastic.
Go ahead.
So Kansa then usurped the throne, forbidding men to worship Rama and to worship Siva instead. Kansa's tyranny continued for many years. Finally, the earth came to Indra in the form of a cow, and Brahma listened to the earth's pleas. And the gods asked Vishnu to again be incarnated and destroy Kansa, just like he did when he became incarnated as Rama. Vishnu arranged that Lakshman, Bharata, and Satrughna would accompany him, and that Sita would be his wife, taking the name of Rukmini. One day, Kansa was carrying Vasudeva and his wife Devaki across the sky, when a voice prophesied that Devaki's 8th child would kill Kansa, and Kansa then drew his sword to kill Devaki. Vasudeva intervened, promising that he would give Kansa every child she bore if he did not kill her. And so they agreed to this, but Devaki was very clever, as every child that was handed over to Kansa was not hers, but those of Hiranyakasipu.
You know, this part of the story reminds me of the lesson I've always taught my boys when we watch those movies about like evil characters in a movie. Mm-hmm. And instead of just taking the shortest solution to their problem, which was just quickly murdering the bad, the opponent, the good guy.
Yeah.
There's always like, well, no, I'm going to do it some other way. And it's like, you should have just killed her.
Yes, he should have.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense that he wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess maybe he had affection for her or something.
Possibly.
Yes.
So Vishnu then said to the goddess Yoganindra, "Go, Yoganindra, go and by my command conduct successfully 6 of their princes to be conceived by Devaki. When these shall have been put to death by Kansa, the 7th conception shall be formed of a portion of Sesha, who is part of me, and you shall transfer before the time of birth to Rohini, another wife of Vasudeva, who resides at Gokula. The report shall run that Devaki miscarries, and I will myself become incarnate in her 8th conception, and you shall take a similar character as the embryo offspring of Yasoda, the wife of a herdsman called Nanda. In the night of the 8th of the dark half of the moon Nabas I will be born, and you will be born on the 9th. Aided by my power, Vasudeva shall bear me to the bed of Yasoda, and you to the bed of Devaki. Kansa shall take you and hold you up to dash you against a stone, but you shall escape into the sky, where Indra shall meet and do homage to you through reverence of me."
Seems like a rather long-winded way about dealing with this problem.
True.
I'm not sure why there has to be all these conditions and things that
essentially what's happening is it's a child swap.
Right.
They're swapping the 2 children. And so what we see here is when Devaki's 8th son was born, Vasudeva took him and crossed the river Yamuna, whose waters only rose to his knees. And he came to the house of Nanda, where Yasoda had given birth to her child, and Vasudeva exchanged the children, bringing Yasoda's child to Devaki. Hearing a child, Kansa then entered Devaki's room and threw the child against a stone. But as the child touched the ground, a mighty cry resounded, and the baby rose into the sky as a great 8-armed figure, telling Kansa that the one who would kill him was already born. Kansa then ordered anyone who sacrificed to the gods must be killed, and that any boy who showed unusual vigor be immediately put to death. Soon Vasudeva and Devaki were freed, and came to Nanda, and Vasudeva gave him his child Rohini, who was born from another woman. So Krishna and Balarama were connected, just as Rama and Lakshman were. Sometime later, a fiend called Putana, not a friend, came to Krishna, and her breast caused instant death, but Krishna sucked with such violence that the fiend instantly died. So it was that Krishna was born, and happiness began to spread throughout the land. So that's the somewhat complicated story of Krishna's birth, but we get introduced this major antagonist, very similar to me, I think, as the tale of the Ramayana.
Oh, I thought it was very similar to you. You're saying that.
Oh,
like
no.
that bad
It appeared
like,
it appeared similar to me. I don't think this is anywhere close to what happened to me.
Oh, okay.
But just the introduction of an antagonist, and of course we have the god becoming incarnated through this, sort of exceptional birth. And then
there's always these stories, like in the ancient world, about the murdering of the babies and stuff. I wonder if that really happened a lot.
Well, I guess it probably did. I mean, we know about like the Spartans and that sort of thing. Any baby who didn't meet their standards was kind of killed.
Yeah. This is more like to prevent some possible usurper.
True.
It seems to be,
Well, I mean, if, somebody has lineage to a throne or something like that,
I guess
you wouldn't want that cousin to be around or something like that. Right. So I'm sure it did happen. And
they were, I was just reading about, I guess it was a book review of a book, a fairly recent one that came out about the communists in China. And, what was that wave in the 1970s? I can't even think of what they call it, but where they made everybody go out into the fields, and they were killing intellectuals and all that kind of stuff. And they murdered rivals, and then they murdered all their children because they didn't want to have the children grow up to seek vengeance upon them. So I guess it's still fairly recent.
It's a thing that happens.
Yes.
Yeah. So the next stories that we get are those of the young Krishna. So Krishna became a very mischievous and powerful boy. And when he was still an infant, he became impatient for his mother and kicked an entire wagon over. When Krishna was 5 months old, a fiend in the form of a cyclone swept him up, but he was able to easily dash the Rakshasa down. Krishna and Balarama also played with the calves in the fields to such an extent that Yasoda tied Krishna to a heavy wooden mortar in the field, but he was able to pull it across the field until it was wedged between 2 trees, uprooting them all together. And all the neighboring farmers, seeing this inexplicable event, believed the land to be unlucky, and all moved away to Vrindravana. One day, Brahma came and stole away the calves and the herd boys from the fields, and Krishna conjured up exact replicas in their place. And when Brahma came a year later to return the real herd boys, he was very confused to see their exact doubles. And Krishna then changed them into the 4 armored likenesses of the gods Brahma, Rudra, and Indra, and Brahma was then in complete awe of the young boy. Krishna also liked to stir trouble amongst the local gopis, and one day these girls were bathing in a pond, and he snatched their clothes, climbing up a tree, and when the girls realized what happened, they hid in the water. Krishna would not hand over their clothes, telling them to instead remove their shame and come to him, and so they did so, bowing before him and receiving their clothes and returning home a little wiser. So especially that last story there, that reminded me particularly of the Chinese stories that we were hearing about. We had 2 different times where we heard about the swan maidens, and a man coming and taking their clothes and forcing one of them to marry him. So I guess that's kind of a common theme, the bathing maidens and then stealing their clothes is something that pops up a couple different places.
Well, I suppose before running water, that happened all the time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's possible.
Seems like an opportunity for young men.
True.
To do something not so right.
Yeah, but we're
the
definitely...
Cultural Revolution was what I was thinking of.
Yes.
Chinese Cultural Revolution.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yes.
They came to me. Actually, I looked it up.
Oh.
But I couldn't think of it.
Yeah.
It's bothering me.
But we're definitely seeing here kind of like the proof that Krishna is this very powerful man or being, I guess.
And the women are interested in him, maybe a little afraid, maybe attracted to him.
I mean, this is definitely, you see a lot of times in other, heroic mythological stories. Reminds me especially of a lot of the Irish stories when we're seeing like Cuchulainn, and when he was growing up and he's the best player of that game, and he's exalted among all the other boys and that sort of thing. This definitely feels familiar to that, at least to me.
Yes. Well, it helps to be a god.
Yes, it does. There's definitely some benefits. So the next story is that of Krishna and Kaliya. One day, the cowherds led the herd to a river, and they all drank, and soon died thereafter. For it was, yes, sadly, for it was poisoned by the snake Kaliya, who had fled from his home of Ramanakadvipa. For Garuda, the enemy of all serpents, had come to live there. Coming to the river, Krishna then restored the lives of all the cows and cowherds with a single glance, and he jumped into the water to fight Kaliya. The cowherds were afraid, but Balarama calmed them, saying that Krishna could not be killed. Krishna made himself very large, and danced on the serpent's many heads, taking on the weight of the entire universe, and Kaliya began to die. However, Kaliya's many wives came to Krishna, begging him to have mercy on the serpent, and he did so. Kaliya begged forgiveness for not recognizing the Lord Krishna earlier. Krishna commanded him to return to his home, but Kaliya feared Garuda, and so Krishna placed a mark on Kaliya's head to show Garuda not to harm him. From that day, the waters were clear of poisons, and all the people rejoiced. So this is definitely another one of those stories, proving that Krishna is this great Lord. This is sort of more important. I guess this is one of the final stepping stones to, sort of proving himself in this sort of fashion. It's different from the mischievous boy. He's vanquishing this terrible beast.
Right.
He's kind of coming into his power as this Lord, this great hero.
True. And this reminds me of St. Patrick's Day, driving around out all the serpents, which is coming up next month.
Yes, true. It's also interesting, just how often snakes pop up in mythologies as these terrible, terrible beasts. Right. It's almost interesting here in that the snake, feels remorse. Usually they're characterized as just completely evil, the image of all evil. Even in Christianity, we see, the devil becomes the serpent in the garden originally. Right. So it is interesting that, he does show remorse and he ends up becoming a better person at the end of the story. So. Yeah. It doesn't just
it seemed like the poison was just in his nature. It wasn't like he's going around, I'm trying to kill all these people.
True.
He was
true.
Swimming in the river and he just poisoned it.
True. Very true. So the next story is that of Krishna and the mountain. So Krishna wished to annoy Indra, jealous of the gifts that the giver of rain received. And so he urged the Gopas that were going to worship Indra and urged them to worship the mountain Govardhana instead. And so they presented the mountain with all their offerings. Krishna then transformed himself, proclaiming that he was the mountain itself, and he ate greedily of the offerings. And Indra grew angry, sending down a flood. Angrily, the Gopas asked Krishna to give them the safety of the mountain now, and so he lifted it easily with the tip of his finger and placed it over them, not letting a single drop of water touch them. Indra, then recognizing Krishna, laid himself down at Krishna's feet.
That's a pretty impressive feat.
That is pretty impressive, just an entire mountain with the tip of his finger.
And, like in India, the rains can be a blessing and also horrible, with the monsoons and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
So, a lot of mountains. It's such a big country. I don't know too much about its geography and weather and stuff like that.
I believe they do have like a dry season and a wet season, like much of, that sort of area of the world is. They don't have like a summer and a winter, but they have a dry and a wet for the most part.
And the wet is really wet.
Yeah, the monsoons. I know it's
weeks and
probably more prominent, further in the Southeast Asia, but I'm sure they do have some of that especially. So it is interesting to see, Indra being one of the biggest gods, the biggest deities, as far as we've seen in this book. I mean, it definitely makes sense. You get terrible, terrible rains, but you also depend on the rains for everything that you do.
The crops and just
you definitely need to, if you believe that there are gods for everything, definitely the god of the rains is one of the ones that you need to worship more than anything else. Yeah. And so the last story in this section is that of Krishna and Radha. And so as Krishna and Balarama lay in the grasses, they were joined by numerous gopis, who all wanted to dance with Krishna, so he multiplied himself to dance with them all. But Krishna's favorite gopi was Radha, the wife of Ayana Ghosha, and Radha's sister-in-law told Ayana Ghosha of Radha's misconduct, and Radha became afraid that her husband would murder her. So Krishna calmed her, saying that if Ayana Ghosha came to her, he would transform into the goddess Kali. And so Ayana Ghosha would not find her with a lover, but worshipping a goddess instead. And so it was that their love affair went on for many years, and their love was true and divine, personifying all that is good in the union of man and woman. And there are many more stories of Krishna, who continued his tricks in his lovemaking, eventually taking on some 16,000 wives. But that is the story of the Mahabharata and other tales. That's the last sentence there of this reading, which, we don't really get the full story of Krishna here. I'm sure we'll get that in future readings and future episodes. So stay tuned, all of you out there, to hear what happens between Krishna and Kansa, which I'm sure we'll get later.
A different lesson than that of the Bible, for one wife and no adultery and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
definitely a different version. Which reminds me, I'll tell you this little story. Let's see, let me make sure I can make it more vague. But anyway, there's a mutual friend of mine. This is years ago, and I was talking to a friend, and this guy comes in. He says, "Hey, did you hear about so and so?" And oh, what, is he okay? And oh yeah. Well, he got kicked out of his house because he was carrying on with another woman, and she got pregnant. So, oh my gosh, he's married, and oh my gosh, and to even consider that was even happening, or that it was just a shock. And one of the guys that I know who was married probably a little bit longer than me at the time said, "I just don't understand." We're like, "Understand what?" He said, "How do you get the time?" He says, like Valentine's Day, you got your wife, you got the kids, you got to do all these things. How do these people find the time to be carrying on surreptitiously with somebody else? And here, this guy's got 16,000. Or is he? He must be a time traveler. Well, he can multiply himself, evidently.
Yes, that's true.
So I guess if you can do that, that's like the old movie. What was his name that replicated himself? He was able to clone himself, but every cloning was like he was doing clones of clones, so they started getting dumber and dumber. Was it Michael Keaton that was in that? The old Batman.
I don't know of the movie. I've never heard of this.
I forget. It wasn't a very good movie. It was like in the 80s. I mean, I think it made money or whatever, but it kind of looks into like all the problems that would be associated with cloning yourself without telling people. Yeah. And all the complications with your personal life and work life.
Yeah. It is definitely interesting to kind of go back to the story of Ayana Ghosha and Radha, just how, even though they are, having an affair, Radha and Krishna, of course, it's still said this is the best love, this is the ideal, what everybody else should be. And I think that's definitely, as we've seen throughout this book, or throughout this section, Hinduism definitely doesn't place an emphasis on, having one wife.
Right.
We've seen, many people with multiple wives, and in many cases it's considered like a holy thing. We saw the father of Rama, and all of his brothers, they all came from different women, and they were, to be idolized and that sort of thing. So I guess it's, not so much of, who you're married to, but like how that love is conducted in that marriage, I think is more of the emphasis. And to have a pure love, it doesn't have to be with one specific person. It could be with a couple different people, but that love between those people has to be pure too.
Yes, it's interesting and wrong.
Yes.
So apologies to all those people following Krishna and his ways and all that kind of stuff. I don't see how any of that stuff works over the long term.
Yeah. Definitely, where we understand it, it's definitely that devotion. It's a special kind of devotion to one particular person, at least in the Christian tradition.
Yeah, well, I'm not even talking about religiously. I just think, well,
where do you have the time?
There's that. But I've been married to your mother for now over 25 years, and you hear different things about what people think, what makes it last long, and I think. Whether it's, like attraction, love and affection and all this other stuff. I think that really the number one thing is loyalty. And everything else is important, but you have to be loyal to the other person. And because once you break that bond of trust, man, it just goes south so fast.
Well, I think also, everything kind of good kind of follows from loyalty too. And everything kind of bad can also, follow from disloyalty in a way. It's much easier to do all those other good things, to have attraction, to have that sort of love if you are loyal. But as soon as you're not loyal, everything else, it's kind of a domino effect, I would think.
And it kind of perverts any good thing that you've done because it becomes suspect. Because then it's like, well, was this partner of mine, my spouse of mine, doing it because they really wanted to, or because they felt guilty, or because
they were trying to hide this other thing.
Or they're making up for something that they did with something else. And I mean, I guess, some people believe in, these multiple partners and that kind of stuff. But boy, I got to tell you, I've never seen. Of course, I've never participated in it, but I've never observed anybody else's relationship work over the long haul that way. And of course, you could say a lot about a lot of marriages end in divorce anyway. But I think a lot of that really originates from people that cheat on each other.
Yeah,
but it's more basic than. I'm not just talking about cheating. I'm talking about loyalty. So, like, you shouldn't be insulting your spouse to other people. I mean, you can always talk to your good friends about problems as long as it's not getting personal. And part of it is, like, I've always been adverse. Well, maybe not always, but I guess I've a long time had an aversion to people who flirt with married people. It's like it's kind of an insult.
Yeah.
It's like, who do you think I am if you're flirting with me and I'm married? Type
yeah,
of thing.
exactly.
So if you have that kind of attitude, it gets you out of trouble. Because then you're insulted by somebody because instead it's dangerous to be flattered by it.
Yeah.
If you go, this person thinks I'm interesting. It's over the long haul, it's better to be like insulted, like, hey, F you.
Yeah. Exactly.
You dirty whore.
Well, thank you for that.
So that's some life advice.
Yes, thank you.
I'm not a believer in Krishna's attitude towards stealing somebody else's wife through your godly powers.
No, probably not a good look for you.
Misuse of divine powers.
Yes,
probably.
True. But what do you think of the section overall?
Well, what do you think? I asked you first. You have not yet revealed your analysis.
I mean, I really liked it. I mean, it's a very brief introduction. It feels like there's still more to come.
Right, and you got to figure there's volumes and volumes and volumes. It's just
these stories,
5 or 6 pages.
5-6 pages. This story, I believe, was from the Mahabharata, which I was saying last time is the longest epic poem ever written.
Right.
So we're definitely missing out on some details. That's for sure. But it definitely does seem, kind of like that sort of what I was talking about last time with the cycles. It seems like another cycle similar to the story of Rama.
Yeah.
You have the incarnation of the god coming down. This prophecy. Great terrible power that only one person can kill. So it's definitely kind of going down that path as well.
Right.
Like Harry Potter, interestingly enough. I just made that connection as I was saying that.
Why?
He's the chosen one. There's only one chosen one to kill Voldemort. Voldemort was this terrible power before the protagonist was even born.
Right.
He has to go through all these trials and tribulations, facing these other terrible things, and then he comes to defeat. Well, which is the hero's journey, basically.
Right.
Have I talked about the hero's journey on this podcast?
I don't think in this season.
On this season? I'm sure I mentioned it last time. Joseph Campbell's The Hero with a Thousand Faces is a great book that I highly recommend that details, all of the sort of steps of the heroic journey in mythology.
What are the main steps? You have to go out into the wilderness at some point, right? Don't you have to be shunned by your own people too?
Somewhat. I mean, it depends on the method of going out into the unknown. But really, like the first step, after the prophecy, sort of and the call to adventure, then it's going out into the unknown, and that's like the first step. The border of the known and the unknown is a big deal in the hero's journey in a lot of these heroic legends.
Yeah, like Star Wars, Luke Skywalker. Typical thing.
He's from Tatooine, and he has to go out into outer space and see all these new things.
Right. Well, he has to go explore the known and unknown with Yoda.
True.
And he has to kind of go into some journey alone, but with the mentor, I guess at that point. But
and then it's the road of trials, I think is what it's called after that. Just individual steps, stepping stones.
Right.
There's like individual parts that are apparent in some like stories and not in some others.
Right.
Like there's the meeting with the goddess. Which can take like a variety of forms, but he gains wisdom to carry on to the next part.
Right.
And then...
Well, it's similar to the story of Jesus, too.
Yeah.
Because he went out into the wilderness 40 days, 40 nights, and all that kind of stuff, and, is receiving messages and all that kind of stuff.
But at the end of the story, he defeats the enemy, but that he can never actually return home. The typical hero, there's no home for him left because he's so fundamentally changed by the journey that he's gone on that he has to go to another place.
Yeah.
Kind of similar to Frodo in The Lord of the Rings. He's so changed by what has happened to him that he has to go on to heaven, basically, to Valinor.
Right. Yeah, very... Anyway, so you saw those similarities in these stories, too.
Yeah, definitely with, at the end of the day, they all do ascend to heaven, at least in the tale of the Ramayana.
Right.
I think it definitely does follow that structure. I mean, particularly with Rama, he's cast out of his own
Right.
country to live as a hermit in the woods. And I
Right.
think that's definitely
Right.
going out into the unknown. That's
Yep.
when he starts all these trials and tribulations and stuff.
Yep. Good points.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes. Well, I appreciate you sharing that.
Oh, thank you. I
Knowledge
appreciate your
insight.
appreciation of me sharing that. That's fantastic.
You can go on forever.
Yes, we could.
Ad infinitum.
Well, what do you think?
I didn't really like him.
Really?
No, I didn't like him.
Oh. Thank you.
I am a real sucker for morality tales, and I mean that just I'm a sucker for them, and so when I see a guy who's bedding down with some other dude's wife, and for years, and tricking that poor devil, she's just saying her prayers. No, she's not. So that's just I mean, how awful would it be for that guy, you know? And the tales of they seem kind of unnecessarily complicated and also kind of silly, some of the details, but I mean, I'm glad we got a summary of them, because I didn't know anything about these stories. Sure. and didn't know anything about Krishna. So now I have kind of an idea of some of the general themes in the stories, but
absolutely.
Other than that, I didn't really care for them.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we're not reading the original story, so they might be a really good read.
Yeah.
But as far as I like I said, I like a good, solid morality tale where bad people get their comeuppance.
Yeah.
And even if the good people don't really get their just rewards, as long as there's some sort of sense of justice.
Yeah. It is kind of interesting then that Krishna's he's presented as a very good and righteous figure, but at the same time he's very mischievous.
Right.
He's causing issues for different people throughout this story.
Well, he's jealous of Indra, and steals essentially the tributes to that by posing as a mountain or whatever it is, and I'm gobbling up all this stuff, and then she floods the whole. He tries to flood the entire universe or whatever, and then he has to protect them by. It's like, well, why didn't you just stay in your lane, buddy?
Yeah. It's interesting. Very interesting.
Yes.
All right. Well, do you have any other thoughts on the Legends of Krishna?
I do not.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could always make up some.
Oh, I'm sure you could.
Give me a minute. I got theories about everything.
But this has been Season 2, Episode 20 of Unlimited Opinions. I've been Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop.
So disappointed that you did not like these stories.
Are you really?
No.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it was a short section.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought they were interesting, but
yeah, I don't know. Interesting mystery. I don't know. It's like, I think they're just kind of bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see where you're coming from, though. Yes. How it's similar to Anansi and the spider trickster stuff.
Yeah. Because it was kind of random. It's like, okay, well, this is how you create. This is this, that. Okay, what does that say about society or about the nature of good and evil and striving for the right path?
True.
I don't see any of that.